Hello, I'm David Mandy, President of O&M Partners, and I want to welcome everyone today to the Southern Silver Exploration Corp's Town Hall webinar. Southern Silver is a part of the Manex Resource Group, trades on the TSX Venture under the symbol SSV, and they also have an OTC listing here in the States, SSVFF. For those who are new to these broadcasts, O&M has become the link between the non-deal investing public and public companies. In past times, these groups passed each other like ships in the night. Our digital roadmap has enabled us to keep pace with the tremendous changes on the ground in investor demographics and how they receive information. Of course, a lot of it has changed due to the fact that most of the active money management is now indexed. So it has changed, and we've changed with it. We want this broadcast to answer all of your questions. Questions will be easily answered by going to the question portal of GoToWebinar or by emailing us. Any questions that remain unanswered at the conclusion of the call, be assured we'll follow up with you at a timely manner right after the call. For those who dialed in with your phone, the only way you can hear our pre-recorded introductory presentation is on your computer speakers. If that's not possible, we hope it'll only be about 9 minutes, and we hope you'll stay tuned for the main presentation. Before we turn to our hosts, it's a real pleasure to introduce our introductory speaker, Chris Marcus of Arcadia Economics. Chris is the founder of Arcadia, which is an Austrian economics-based financial market research firm that helps investors understand and navigate the bubbles inflated by the Federal Reserve's monetary policy. Chris's background includes 11 years on Wall Street. He's an MBA from Wharton. He has 7 years as an equity options trader on the American New York Exchange. Chris left Wall Street to focus his research on the gold and silver markets. He currently hosts a financial show on YouTube, and he's the author of the book, The Big Silver Short, that focuses on the leverage in the silver market. And there certainly is a lot of leverage in the silver market right now, and how that's left in place the dynamics for the short squeeze of a lifetime. So on that note, it's a real pleasure to turn the call over to Chris.
Hello there, my friends. Chris Marcus here with you. I am from Arcadia Economics and happy to be doing this brief update on what's going on in the silver market because it sure is beyond fascinating. And maybe one way of putting it in perspective, my background included trading equity options on the New York Stock Exchange, which I walked away from in 2012 because I was so stunned at what was building beneath the surface back then, let alone what's happened since then and happening now, where the silver profile is really quite incredible. And the short version of what you've had happening is that silver is priced in paper, which is a little different than physical silver. And as we know on Wall Street, markets get distorted. And essentially, to put that in perspective, I just released a book called The Big Silver Short, where I interviewed 15 silver experts. One of the questions I asked them is that for each ounce of silver that's out there, how many different paper claims exist on it? Different people think they own it. I've yet to hear an answer of lower than 500 to 1. I've heard some numbers that get even bigger than that. But I think you get the point where when you start selling the same thing multiple times, putting leverage on it, you almost guarantee that at some point you have an ending similar to what happened at the conclusion of It's a Wonderful Life. And that seems to be the way Wall Street does things, especially in a lot of the commodities these days. And then what happens then is that sometimes you see things like silver goes to $50 in 2011, and then despite more money printing, more debt, now Jerome Powell wants to print so much money, he can't even put a number on it, so they make it unlimited, and yet they give you the impression that an even bigger package will be coming before the end of the year. So that tells you all you need to know from the monetary side. Yet silver Not only is it trading a third of its 2011 high, it's trading a third of its 1980 high, whereas gold now crossing 1800, so about $100 away from its all-time high, double its 1980 high. Silver really hasn't caught up for a few reasons. It's a smaller market. Again, when it's not a hot market, a lot of people lost interest and lost faith. Although I would suggest in my study of markets, if you imagine a fair point would be where there's some energetic balance between the buyers and sellers. Um, well, gee, if you have a world where there's full of impatience and you have the ability to be patient, really creates quite an opportunity, especially at this particular time, because in these last 9 years, well, not much happened with the price. People would say, well, when does this change? When, all right, we get it, it's manipulated. When does that change? And my best guess has always been, well, when you have people saying, hey, I actually want my metal, I'm taking physical delivery, that's what starts to create problems in this scheme. And interestingly enough, it does appear that we have reached that point. And I'm going to share my screen here. What you're looking at now is the delivery report from the COMEX. So this is where the metals are traded. And it shows how much metal is actually being put up for delivery. Now for years, you could say even decades, most of these was just get rolled over. And most people didn't feel a need to take delivery of their metal. You have a housing bubble. Germany asked for their gold back. You say you'll give them 10% over 7 years, and enough incidents like that build up, and people start saying, yeah, unlimited printing, that is quite a bit, and eventually leads to what you see here. Now this is for the gold futures, and you see, you had 14,000, 2,000, 3,000. People were pretty blown away following Corona. There was a surge in demand for metal. And you see here what was at the time a stunning 31,000 contracts delivered. And keep an eye on that. It was maybe the end of the system. Then you have a big 10,000 in a non-delivery month before what we saw last month, where 55,000 contracts, which is a record, were posted for delivery. And as that was happening, you have silver where July was the delivery month. So as myself and a lot of others in the silver community were wondering, gee, well, if people were demanding gold, what happens if they start demanding silver? And sure enough, as we get down to the silver chart, where did you go? There we go. On the first day of the July silver deliveries, already set an all-time record. And now you can see down here, we're up to 14,000 contracts, 13,900. Keep in mind, each contract is for 5,000 ounces of silver. So that's about 70 million ounces that have been delivered. Again, you can see 4,000, 1,000, 300, 4,000, and there's somewhere are considered the delivery months. So you expect more, but still you saw the big number here. And then in July, 13,900. To put that in perspective, that's 70 million ounces. The total amount mined in a normal year is 900 million ounces. The market, according to Silver Institute numbers, was in a deficit last year, and now we're seeing a spike in deliveries. And compounding that is the just rather staggering amount. That was the COMEX. Obviously, if you're in the silver world, you've probably heard of SLV, similar to GLD, which is the gold trust, but SLV at least making the promise that as people buy more shares, metal is deposited. Whether that happens is a conversation for another day, and there is some risk there, but at least according to these numbers they're putting out. Now you see the gray line back here is the price, and when silver went down to $12 back in late March, well, that kicked off another cascade of buying, just staggering amounts. Again, you see over here, it's about maybe 1,125 million ounces we're in there, and now we're up to 1357. So that's about 230 million ounces, again, in a market that was in a deficit last year. And even last year when the mines were open, they mined 900 million, as I'm sure you're aware, and probably we'll hear more about today in this call. A lot of mines have been shut down. So you could say, in other words, that unless this data is fraudulent, the run on silver and gold, for that matter, has already begun. Interestingly, it appears that same is happening in platinum as well. So while I would not say go out, bet the farm that silver is going to hit $50 this year, certainly the conditions that would proceed whenever that finally happens are really happening now. These are stunning amounts of metal being reported. And to me, it's almost, you're at that place where the two primary outcomes are either the data is fraudulent, which, you know, would seem like, why would you make fraudulent data if everything is okay, or where the numbers are just staggering. And perhaps I'll end on this note where I do have a show on YouTube each night where I bring different silver experts from around the world, similar to the book. And everybody I've talked to pretty much is in agreement that there's a lot of reasons to love gold, and there's a lot of reasons to be excited about what's happening in the metals and the mining stocks. And if you do like gold or the miners, if you start digging into what's really going on behind the scenes in silver, I mean, you'll be stunned by what you find, and you'll learn more about that in today's call. So I'll wrap up there, but again, pleasure to be here and hope you found that helpful.
Thank you, Chris Marcus. Great presentation, really helpful, giving us context. Real pleasure. That's my son calling me. Okay, now we're going to turn to our hosts. We have Larry Page with us today. Larry's the president, director of Southern Silver. He's also the chairman of the Manex Group. Larry, over his career, has trained as a lawyer, and always worked in the areas of natural resource law, corporate securities law. But through his experience as a lawyer with natural resource companies, in particular precious metals, Larry has established a unique relationship. I'd say he's kind of uniquely qualified to work in all the various areas of the business, from finance to geology to working with consultants to counsel public companies. So he's able to wear many hats, and he's worked for companies which have discovered and developed producing mines in North America. So he's worked with some of the best companies. He's the principal of the Manex Resource Group, Manex Resource Group of Vancouver, which provides the administrative, financial, and corporate services to a number of public companies in the mineral resource sector. Also a pleasure to introduce Rob McDonald, who is the Vice President of Exploration at Southern Silver. Rob has been exploration manager for several publicly listed companies, which include Homestake Resources, Valterra, Duncastle, and Fortune River. He's overseen the exploration of many projects throughout North America, beginning with discovery, delineation of high grade. He high grade of 1.2 million ounce Homestake Ridge. So he's got some real success in his background as a discovery geologist. Over his career in the geosciences, Rob's work is focused particularly on vein and intrusion related gold systems, and Rob will explain how that fits in today. So I want to start. I'll turn it over to management. Real pleasure.
David, thank you very much. You've just taken the first 3 paragraphs of my opening remarks, so I'll continue, but I'll be brief.
Sorry to cannibalize, Larry.
No, I'm pleased. You said it in a very concise way.
Thank you.
As David said, the company today that we're presenting is Southern Silver, and it's one of a continuum of companies that we've matured over the years in the Manex Group. And about 10 years ago, we had our last big success in Western Silver. And Western Silver started out as a penny dreadful, as what most of them do, and had a good property in Zacatecas, Mexico, and over time was able to raise enough money to take it to the stage where it was attractive to majors. Glamis Gold made a tender offer for the shares of Western, and then Gold Corp made a tender offer for Glamis Gold. So the shareholders had a $1.2 billion payday. And that's the modus operandi that we like to try to emulate. And we think we're on our way with Southern Silver. We made the decision to keep the group intact, specifically the infrastructure in Mexico, because going to a foreign country, you want to feel comfortable that you can operate there from a logistics point of view, as well as legal and geology and accounting, etc. So we had all of those building blocks. Our principal geologist there found a property in Durango that Rob's going to tell you about. We bought it right. It was a compilation of a number of disparate claims that a Mexican national was able to bring together. We struck a deal to pay $4 million US over a period of time. And we did that. We had some help from Freeport McMoran that farmed into the property. Spent $5 million in a short period of time drilling some deeper holes looking for a porphyry. Freeport left Mexico around that time, and we were left with the property and a lot more data, and we pretty much owned it at that stage. And the recession of 2012 was around, and it was difficult to raise money at pennies. And we were approached by the Electrum Group out of New York, and I knew some of the principals of that company, so we were able to convince them to invest in our company. We did a couple of rounds of financings and put the money in the ground, and it became apparent that wasn't an efficient way of doing it. So we struck a deal where Electrum could earn a 60% interest in the property by spending $5 million US over 5 years with us as operators. So we've been operators throughout, and we've been able to amass all the geological data and put it in a database. In any event, that happened. We're a 60-40 joint venture indirectly through corporations, etc., is the way you do things in Mexico. Laterally, about the last year, it became apparent that Electrum had other fish to fry. They were developing a polymetallic mine in Chihuahua. The Los Gatos property, the metal mix is very similar to what we have at Cerro Las Minitas. And they had it in Sunshine Silver Mining and Refining, which is an old company with a lot of history. In any event, they were floating that company and never quite made it. COVID came along and delayed production, the continuance of production at Los Gatos. And they said that they didn't want to spend any more money at Cerro Las Minitas. I'm telling you this in some length because I have to field questions as why is Electrum, which owns 36% of your company, selling you a working interest? They haven't verbalized it in quite the way I'm doing it, but I believe that my explanation is valid explanation. They said finally, we'll sell you the working interest. We dickered back and forth. We came up with a deal which I thought was fair. We have a year to pay for the interest. It's denominated in cash and shares. At our election, we can continue to pay cash. They exercised a warrant to buy 9 million shares of our company at closing, and we utilized that money to pay a deposit. So we partially paid for the transaction. And so that's where we are today. We're on our way to convening a shareholders meeting in September. we're having an annual general meeting in any event, so we put a resolution in because we have to have a vote of the disinterested shareholders. And that's all happening very nicely, and we expect that we'll close the transaction on or about September the 4th, at which time we'll take control of the property. In essence, we've taken control of the property now. We have workers on the ground. I'm stealing a bit of Rob's thunder because he's going to tell you about that. And so that's where we are. We're in the midst of a raise, and all is well. And we expect that this could be positioning of the company in such a way that a miner, which we're not, will come along at an appropriate time and bring this property into production, and the shareholders will have an event, a financial event, which will be very beneficial. Having said that, Rob's going to tell you about the property and why he's going to be able to take it to where I think it should go. So I'll socially distance to the left, and Rob can come in.
Okay, thank you very much, Larry. And it's a great introduction, a great encapsulation of what we're doing here. And thank you all for joining us on this conference call and presentation. So let's see, just to make sure. We can see we're going to be dealing with Southern Silver Exploration Corp. I will be making some forward-looking statements. These are aspirational in nature and projections, and they should be treated as such as I go through the presentation. And we'll be happy to answer questions on these projections if you like. Okay, with Southern Silver, we've covered the transaction and believe that this is a transformative value-creating transaction for the company. It is basically based around the Cerro Las Minitas project, which sits right now as one of the largest and highest grade undeveloped silver projects in the world. We have indicated and inferred resources totaling 272 million silver equivalent ounces at high grades, within a well-established mining district within the Faja de Plata of Mexico. The agreement to acquire Electrum's 60% interest is for $15 million in cash and share payments. And what that will do is increase our holdings in the property to 150%. And in terms of a net asset value of the project, an increase of 138%. So this is highly accretive transaction to the Southern Silver shareholders, based both on resource acquisition and the net asset value of the project. So not only do we have a good situation in that respect, buying ounces at an excellent cost in today's rising silver market, but we also have the potential to increase resources through further exploration on the property. We currently have a 24 million ton resource that again totals 272 million silver equivalent ounces. We believe we have an exploration plan in place that can increase that into the 30 to 35 million ton range and increase the resources to 350 million silver equivalent ounces. We've identified 10,000 meters of drilling that we will start a little bit later in 2020 with the objective of increasing the resources to 350 million silver equivalent ounces. So in terms of the actual transaction, we've talked about it. These are the highlights. The main thing is that it gives us 100% control of the asset and 100% control of the timeline related to further development of the asset. It increases our attributable resources 150% and the net asset value 138%. This is highly accretive to the Southern shareholders, and it also makes us a more attractive takeover target and enhances the market profile of the company. At the close of the deal, we would end up increasing our enterprise value, doubling it, and this is based at a 20-cent share price. If we're actually sitting at a 30-cent share price, the enterprise value would be more, is clearly more than this. And so I think we're already seeing the opportunity that exists within within the transaction. Electrum remains a solid backer of the company and wants to see us move forward and create more value through their interest in the company. And so at the end of the there we go. At the end of the day, we see the increase in resources, we see the increase of net asset value, and at the 20-cent level, we see a decrease in the enterprise value over the total resource and the price per NAV, which again are getting further discounted in the market, but we're starting to see the market catch up to that, and we're seeing that being reflected in our current share price. Again, compared to our peers, we believe that we've been discounted because we were not a majority shareholder of the primary asset. And so as we become the majority shareholder and the owner of the asset, we expect that we will be valued a little bit more like our peers in the market. And I believe we're starting to see that reflected in the current movement in the share price, similar to price per NAV, relatively undervalued. And we expect to be re-rated as we move the transaction forward. In terms of the actual asset itself, it's one of the largest and highest grade silver assets that are currently being explored and developed. We firmly sit within the top 10 of resources that are out there, and of those top 10, we are the highest grade. And so this is a tremendous opportunity to invest in high-grade, silver-enriched resources that we believe are on their way to becoming a mine. The people that are involved with the project, it's really a story of being there, done that, with a serious history of success in Mexico. When you look through the group, they've been involved with the identification and development of a dozen different mines and flagship and deposits throughout the world, many of them in Mexico. For example, Penasquito, the San Nicolas mine, and the Los Gatos mine. Other world-class deposits include Hemlo and Esque Creek and San Cristobal in Bolivia. So this is a group of people that know what major deposits look like. They know how to develop them, and they know how to bring them to a development stage with the right people for the benefit of the shareholder. In terms of the project portfolio, we have two projects in Southern Silver. The Oro project is in southern New Mexico. It's an earlier stage project, 100% owned, large laramide copper moly gold porphyry system. That's at an earlier stage. I'll get to that later in the presentation, but we're really going to focus on the flagship of the company, which is Cerro Las Minitas, located in the heart of the Faja de Plata in north central Mexico. We'll have 100% interest in the project following the transaction with Electrum. We continue to advance the project towards polymetallic production, a silver, lead, zinc project with the backing of a partner like Electrum who know how to develop these projects, and a team involved with the company that knows how to develop these types of projects. We spent $18.5 million to date since acquisition and exploration in 2011, and we have new targets for significant resource expansion in 2020, and we also have a PEA in the works as we move the project forward. Next resource milestone is 350 million silver equivalent ounces, and we continue to work on the engineering and metallurgical side to de-risk the project for the investor. So again, Cerro Las Minitas, well placed. We're on the edge of the Altiplano, not in the mountains, but out in the agrarian fields. Like I like to joke, we're out in the middle of the bean fields, not the marijuana fields. Very safe jurisdiction to operate in. I've been going down there for the last 9 years, 4 or 5 times a year. I've never had to have security. We have support of the local ejido, as well as all our permits in place are with the state and the local authorities to keep on exploring. We've drilled 133 drill holes for just under 60,000 meters to date, 18.5 million spent, and a cash discovery cost for the resources we have in the ground now of 7 cents an ounce, silver equivalent, or alternatively half a penny a pound as a zinc equivalent basis. We see a clear pathway to increase our resources an additional 30% through a 10,000 meter drill program that we're planning a little bit later in late Q3, Q4 of this year. This is the claim position of the Cerro Las Minitas project. It's here in yellow. This area right here with the star is where we have our resources. We're located just 70 kilometers outside of the city of Durango, which is located to the southwest, and the highway to Torreon runs right through the project. There's power lines that run through the project. There's a rail line that runs just south of the town of Guadalupe, Victoria, which acts as our base of operations. It is merely a 5-minute drive to the project. We're surrounded by major players, and active mining at Hecla's San Sebastian mine, and Divino's gold and silver mine, and a little bit further afield, Argonaut Gold's, El Castillo, and San Agustin. A little bit further to the west, we're just off our western boundary, is Core Mining's La Preciosa deposit, and along our northern boundary is Fresnillo's El Titanic claim. So again, a series of majors. It's a fairly mature, both exploration and mining district with excellent access, and a very, very safe jurisdiction with a very strong and supportive state authorities in terms of the governor and his people. And again, to highlight that, we have our exploration agreements in place with the local ejido. We have our environmental permits in place with the state. We've met the governor and his minister of mining on 3 different occasions over the last several years. And we continue those relationships as we continue to develop the project. This is Cerro Las Minitas. It's the Hill of Mines. In the foreground, you see the 4-lane divided highway that runs right through the property, one of the aforementioned bean fields. And this is the Cerro. It's really horseshoe shaped with and surrounding a central monzonite intrusive. It's a zone of skarn and hornfels alteration that hosts much of the mineralization that resulted in smaller chiselal mines being driven around the neck of the intrusion. We stepped off that with some geophysical surveys, identified an anomaly out in this area, drilled that. That became our Blind and El Sol and Las Victorias zones, which extend now 1.2 kilometers in a northwest-southeast direction. Deeper drilling on the Blind and the El Sol zones, we tagged into a thick zone of mineralization, which after further step-out drilling developed into the Skarn Front deposit. This is the major deposit on the in the property, and it skies out here on surface a little bit further upslope. This is one of my few geology pictures, and it really shows the components of discovery for the deposit. This is a classic CRD skarn type system, silver, lead, zinc rich, very similar to San Martin, Grupo Mexico's project located around 100 kilometers to the south, La Paria, First Majestic, located about 80 kilometers to the south, and Peñoles Valordeña district, which is located just up the road, up that same highway, about 100 kilometers. So what we have here is a central intrusion that acts as the heat pump for the system, a zone of alteration around that central intrusion, a series of historic mines. Those are the half-filled squares that dot the map, and that's the evidence of the artisanal mining that's been happening over the last 50 to 80 decades, back into the middle of last century. On the side, we identified our target, drilled that. That became our Blind and El Sol and Las Victorias zone, which has that strike length of 1.2 kilometers. And then deeper drilling identified the Skarn Front deposit. Highlighted in red and shaded in yellow is the surface projection of the deposits that we currently have now identified at the Cerro Las Minitas project. In a schematic section, you have your intrusive neck, your areas of historic mining, your zone of alteration, your series of deposits in red that line that. take note of the skarn front deposit. It happens when the central intrusion flattens out a little bit and it thickens up. It becomes our thickest and richest zone of mineralization that now accounts for 200 million ounces out of the 270 million ounces that we've currently identified on the project. This is a breakdown of the mineral resource. 272 million ounces in the indicated and inferred categories, metal deportment of 83 million ounces of silver, and 2.2 billion pounds of combined lead and zinc. Again, to just break it down a little bit further, it's 23.9, roughly 24 million tons of resource, 18 million tons. Over 18 million tons sit within the skarn front deposit. It is the thickest and overall the richest deposit that we have in the system. This is what it looks like in terms of the block model. And this really the main thing to take away here is that it extends within tens of meters of surface, so it's very, very shallow, and extends down to about 1 kilometer in the Copper Deep area, where we're starting to see a transition from the silver-lead-zinc deposit that we have here and into a potential copper zone at depth. But it is a little bit deeper, and our main focus is within the upper part of the system currently. Again, we've drilled 60,000 meters in 133 drill holes at a cash cost of 7 cents an ounce, silver equivalent, or half a penny a pound, zinc equivalent. So in terms of resource expansion, we've outlined a plan to take the resource from 24 million tons, add 30% to it to get it up over 30 million tons. And this is where we want to do it. We have our known resources on the west of the central intrusion. We can extend those a little bit further, about 150, 200 meters to the southeast. And so we're targeting some more drilling in this area in the Las Victorias target. The big prize, though, is on the eastern side of the central intrusion, where we've already drilled 15 holes, but we haven't really tied them together in resources or added them to what we have on the west side of the central intrusion. So this is where we would hope to add another several million tons that would add into the already existing resource that we have. And where we'd like to do it, you can see some of the historic drilling on the east side of the deposit, some of the highlight holes sitting in here. The smaller holes, the yellow holes in here would be our proposed drilling for these areas. And so the idea is to tie in all of these holes in here, maybe extend things down a little bit, but also target the Mina Lavacona area right in here, which is a hanging wall zone that we have 2 or 3 holes in already. And we want to tie those together and maybe add another 1 million or 2 million tons of higher grade mineralization in this area. You can see the grades, both the absolute silver grades that we have in some of these intercepts, a very high grade mineralization up to 450 grams silver over 4 meters, down hole. And again, similar holes, 2.5 of 500. There's half a meter of over 1 kilo silver, 1 meter of 600 silver. So some very high grade silver intercepts that we're going to be stepping off and building those into our resource model and adding to what we have already established on the property. We also have some other targeting within the project area, but it is much earlier stage. This is the area of the Cerro where we have our current resources. As you move off to the southwest, you transition from an upthrown block of older Cretaceous age sediments into some tertiary age volcanics. And this is with the similar host to what hosts the Avino gold silver mine to the north and the La Preciosa project to the west. We have some preliminary drilling in here that give us some silver and Pathfinder arsenic and antimony values. And the sense is that we're still a little bit high up in the system. We get a little bit deeper here and we can get into an Avino style vein system, which the Avino system has been mined since 1964. But that's for another day. The main focus is the area of the Cerro. In terms of de-risking the project, metallurgical test work, the highlights of that are the lock cycle test work that we recently completed on the Skarn Front deposit and announced in last January of this year. The highlights are to identify three separate concentrates, a copper, lead, and zinc concentrate from the Skarn Front deposit, with excellent recoveries and excellent grades coming out of that lock cycle work. So we're getting high recovery in lead and silver with high grade lead and silver. It's about a $3,500 per ton NSR value on this material. Just under 95% recovery of our zinc, and a very, very clean zinc concentrate here. Low silver reporting to the zinc concentrate, which is a good thing because you don't get as good values for silver within the zinc concentrates. And then we're also managed to get some copper recovery in a saleable copper concentrate with a good amount of silver mineralization reporting to that concentrate. So all told, we're getting over 80% recoveries of lead. We're getting 83, 84% recovery of silver into good payable concentrates, and we're getting a high-grade copper con, which also adds value to the entire system. All good news, and that's now being rolled into an NSR model, which we're now having mine modeling work done on the property in preparation for the publication of a PEA later in the year. Very quickly with the Oro project, it's located in southern New Mexico, just alongside the Arizona Copper Belt. It's a large system, earlier stage system, good alteration halo, mineral zoning going out to a gold system on the flanks. And we believe it's it's a deep system. We're in the upper parts of the system, so we did a Z-Temp survey on that. And in the Z-Temp survey, we've identified good porphyry target in this area and some good conductivity targets in here that we've all wrapped up into around 5,000 meters of drilling. We're looking for a partner to spend the money on that as we focus on Cerro Las Minitas. But again, it's another arrow in the quiver that we have in the company moving forward. And that's really what we have here. It's a transformative transaction with Electrum that gives us full control of the Cerro Las Minitas project and the timeline for further development of that project. And the project itself is one of the largest and highest grade undeveloped silver projects in the world. And we also have a target to increase that resource by 30% in a program that's due to start in Q4 of this year and extend into 2021. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Well presented, Rob. Larry, we're going to turn to questions now. We'll start with Marshall Farrell. Marshall, question today?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Very informative. Quite a couple questions I have with regards to the Electrum transaction and your financing, and assuming those go through. Will Electrum have any kind of buyback or clawback options?
Well, let me respond to that. The short answer is no. The transaction provides that we'll take over their share of the corporation, the BVI Corporation, which controls the Mexican company, which owns the property. So there's no clawback, there's no nothing. It's just they have an expectation of being paid at closing in 6 months and 1 year with no hooks.
And so then you'll own 100% of the project, and Electrum will have a 36% interest in Southern Silver. And are there any restrictions on their ability to sell that interest?
No contractual restrictions. The only restrictions are securities regulations, whereby they own over 20%, so they have to make appropriate filings and give advance warning and sell proportionately over time.
If they choose to, or they can just hold on for the eventual activity.
Yeah. And that's a more likely situation.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what's your sense? I know they're going to make their own decisions. What's your sense of what their longer term viewpoint is?
Well, looking at their experience, they're very involved with Nova Gold and financing that, and so they've got a longer term. It's interesting that they were trying to float their Sunshine Silver Mine and refining. They didn't have success on that, so I just had lunch with Steve Orr yesterday, who's the president of that company, and he tells me they're breaking up the company and they're going to float the company which owns the Los Gatos property in Chihuahua. So they're fairly busy on that. They've got some debt there, and I think they want to do an equity issue. They're talking about doing an initial IPO of $100 million. So they've got to stick to their knitting right now as to what they're doing. And they're saying to us, you've taken the Cerro Las Minitas this far, keep going. We're going to be happy long-term shareholders.
Okay, thank you. And my last question is, are there any royalties on the project?
There are none.
Okay, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Thank you, Marshall. We're going to turn now to Bruce Stagel. Bruce, questions today? I see that Bruce is muted. Okay.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me?
Can indeed, Bruce.
Excellent. Can you talk a little bit? You mentioned, I thought I saw something about doing an offering to raise, what was it, $7 or $8 million in the short term?
That's correct. We've announced an offering to raise a minimum of 7 with a green shoe to take it up to 10. This is Canadian dollars. And it's a unit offering with a half of a warrant. It's a 3-year warrant, exercisable. First of all, the unit is 20 cents Canadian. The warrant is exercisable in the first year at 25 cents, 30 cents in the second year, and 35 in the third year. And that's the equity raise that we've announced and we're in the process of.
How long will that cash last you? Will that get you through the season on what you want to drill?
We've got about 3.7 billion in the treasury, uncommitted. And if we close the minimum amount, the 7 million, that'll get us the 5 million American that we need for the down payment. And give us our drilling money and some G&A.
Thank you very much. Good luck, gentlemen. It looks.
Thank you, Bruce. Bruce, yeah, thank you. We'll turn to Doug Wow. Doug, questions today?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can indeed.
Okay, the machine wanted me to unmute you. I've been to the Avino site, so if you're where I think you are, which I sort of thought of as off in the distance and some hills to the south, they were really interested in that. You're smiling, so is that where I think you are? Is where you are? And that would be a very interesting place to be, as well as surrounded by interesting other companies.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We know the Avino company very well. Their consulting mining engineer was also consulting to us. He was a dear friend of ours before his passing, and so they've welcomed us onto their site. They know about us. We've talked about if there's any synergies over time, and so we're all a brotherhood in the local area at the present time.
Well, that's great to know, but they have lots of interesting machinery. You mentioned some other minerals besides silver, so you're sort of in the position of announcing you're a silver company, and then you have these other minerals that will give you credits against your cash costs. But what do you think your cash cost will be per ounce after the credits?
Leave that one for you, Rob.
You mean the cash cost for mining, or the cash costs for building a major project?
If you were in production, what do you think your cost would be for mining?
The mining cost for the NSR calculation is going to be around $60 a ton. And so that will involve what your mining costs are and your processing costs. And then within the NSR calculation, then you end up, once it goes to the smelter, it then becomes what you get back from the smelter on that. But the actual mining costs would be closer to, as I say, around, for mining, G&A, and processing to basically run it through the mill is around $60 a ton.
Okay, and of course, going to the smelter, some people feel requires an MBA all of its own versus what you might get paid.
Well, this is why we brought on a consultant who's had around 30-40 years in the business and has done these contracts and whatnot. So, when we are speaking to the traffic bureaus of the world, for example, we hand it over to Arthur to ask the questions on our behalf.
So if you're like Avino, you're sort of stuck doing concentrate. You can't sneak in some doré bars.
Unfortunately, no. I think it is really concentrate. But some of these results that we had are really good, and they were very surprising, both in the how clean the zinc concentrate was, but the actual value of that lead concentrate. And that has most of the silver mineralization. And as I said, I think the NSR value, and it's a back of the envelope, and these numbers change as prices go up and down, but it's somewhere in the in the area of $3,500 per ton. And so the more that you can produce of that, that's really going to be the breadwinner of the operation. The rest of it will allow you to mine, and will start paying down your well, I guess it'll allow you to mine and run your operations, and whereas the lead concentrate will pay for your profit and pay down your capital costs.
Right. So there's one last question, and I'll leave you alone. Of the other minerals you have more copper, more zinc, more lead?
It's more zinc, definitely, and then but there still is a pretty good credit of copper, and I guess being an explorationist, you're never done in finding more. And we have had hole 98 ended up drilling a pretty interesting hit of higher grade copper mineralization down in the lower parts of the deposit. So you may very well be seeing a transition that if a really big boy came in and wanted to explore there, they'd probably be drilling some much deeper holes to see if you could find a brand new copper skarn down there. So it's as I say, as an explorationist, you never really want to finish drilling, but in terms of developing the project and showing value in the project, we want to keep moving with the engineering that we have now.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Very interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. We'll turn to Heinz Thoma. Heinz, questions today for the team?
Thanks for the presentation. My questions were answered. Thank you.
Thank you, Heinz. We're going to turn to Martin DeBovis. Martin, questions today? Let's come back to Martin Scott. Let's go to Murray Vandervelde, please. Murray, question today? We're just waiting for you, Murray, to unmute.
There we go. How's that?
Yeah, we can hear you, buddy.
Sorry. Thanks for the presentation. I did have a question on the finances, was answered. Interesting. I'm certainly be doing some work on it. I think there's a real opportunity here. Appreciate it. Time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's nice to hear.
Yeah, especially coming from Murray. Great to have you on our side with this, Murray. It's really good. Great investor. Let's turn to Rick Winters. Question today, Rick?
Sure. Thank you. Thanks, Larry. Thanks, Rob. A couple questions. On the Ejido agreements, I'm just curious as to why you weren't or didn't pursue a strategy of trying to get an agreement that covered exploration, development, and exploitation, or were the Ejido not willing to go that far?
Yeah, I think that certainly at the time, I mean, this was about 5 years ago, or 4 or 5 years ago, when we signed or re-upped the agreements. We had some earlier stage ones, and it was more of just where we were in the project, and we were really in the exploration stage. We had no concept about you know, how exactly what we were going to be dealing with in terms of the deposit, a development scenario, and so, you know, you don't really want to burden a project when you don't with you know, whatever commitments you might have to do, you know, in terms of an actual development agreement. I'd rather I think would rather know what we had and be able to negotiate in good faith based on that knowledge base. So it was just more of the scheduling. They're 25-year agreements, but you know, they were negotiated about 5 or 6 years ago.
Okay, it's just too early at that point.
Yeah, that was the short answer.
I appreciate the presentation. I also went through the 43-101 that's available, and I guess I'm trying to get my head around the nature of the beast here. And we've got, I understand the styles of mineralization, and certainly it's the case that the bulk, you know, 75% or 80% is in the skarn zone. And then I look at your composites, which are 1.5 meter composites, and I look at your estimation blocks, which are 10 by 10 by 2 meter blocks. And go ahead.
No, I'm disagreeing. Yes.
And you know, you read through and you in the 43-101, you really don't have detailed cross sections to get a hard idea of what it looks across that zone, but you read that the mineralization itself is in you know, subvertical banded zones. Is that right? Is that the reason for the narrower composite? And is this a series of subvertical structures that you're going to be mining? I'm just curious. It seems pretty thin in a situation like that where you're using you know, 1.5 meter composites and 2 meter wide blocks. Huh?
Yeah. Now, I guess some of that goes back to how the project developed. And if you recall, we originally started on the Blind El Sol and then Las Victorias zones. Those tended to be thinner zones that were associated on the margins of a dike swarm of monzonite and felsite dikes. And then in structures that would have been adjacent to those, maybe what were ultimately controlling structures for the dikes as well. And those zones tend to be a little bit thinner, and again, you know, sort of on that 2 meter sort of thickness. And those were also subvertical zones. So some of that language may be a little bit held over from those areas. As you get deeper, you start drilling into the skarn front zone, and what happens there, and is that your there we go, is that your central intrusion flattens out a little bit. And what happens is that your skarn zone thickens up in those areas where it flattens out, and I presume because of more fluid flow. You end up having a high-grade zone right at what's called the skarn-marble transition, which is really classic, a classic location within skarn deposits. But there's also a second deeper zone that tends to be a little bit closer to the central intrusion. And so you kind of have two sub-parallel zones within the skarn front. Now, what happens when these zones thicken up? Sometimes you get multiple zones, and sometimes these zones coalesce into one thicker zone. And so in the skarn front, we were often stepping off of 15, 20, 25, 30 meter thick zones of mineralization that were basically the result of these, you know, what were two zones blowing out and becoming one big zone. And so within the main skarn front deposit, I think your average thickness is over 4 meters, 4 to 5 meters thick. and with some of these zones ending up being 15, 20 meters thick and very amenable to bulk mining, underground mining methods. So yeah, some of that language is probably from the earlier parts, and the upper part, or I shouldn't necessarily say the upper part of the system, but the blind and the El Sol zones, they tend to be a little bit thinner than the main skarn front.
I wonder, Rob, is there anywhere that there's some more detailed cross sections available, just to kind of look at that?
Well, if you get me your email address, I can send some to you.
That'd be excellent. The other thing, if you could do, which would just be useful for me, is in terms of the validation, the resource in that 43-101, you mentioned, well, the author mentioned what was done, but he mentioned the swath plots, but there were none provided. Is there any way you could, I could see what the swath plots in comparisons to the other estimation methods look like?
I could ask. I should be able to get these swath plots. Okay. Okay, and this is it? Hello, this is Rich. Okay, so I've got your name, and I'll get your email, and I'll send you the sections first off, and then try and track down the swap plot.
Excellent. Yeah, my other question was looking at metallurgy from the 43-101, which there's some confusion in there you guys can look at, but I note that you've done more work, so I think there's more information. But what I'd be curious is, has any mineralogical thin section work been done just to have a good idea visually of where the metals are in respect to the sulfides from the different zones?
Yes. We've done 3 different episodes of thin section work at various times, with the concentration being on the some of the ore sections, the sulfide sections. It's a pretty simple mineralogy with sphalerite and galena with plus or minus chalcopyrite. The silver tends to hang with the galena. There's a couple of areas, and in terms of some of the sections in the SEM work that we've done, there's very, very rarely some of the more not obscure but less known silver minerals, but not to any great extent. And I think that's reflected in much of the metallurgy, particularly this later metallurgy that we've been able to produce. So it tends to be fairly simple, fairly known and common throughout these types of deposits in Mexico.
No, very good. I have just one last question for you on economics, and allow you and/or Larry to do a little bit of arm waving. It's kind of an arm waving question. We've got in the estimation work that's been done, $75 a ton total cost assumption. At $17 a silver, at the cutoff grade, it's about $95 a ton. So there's kind of an implicit, somewhat less than 30% margin, which begs the question, and this is the final question, how do we go forward, guys? I mean, we're going to get more information from your exploration program now in terms of infill to improve the confidence of the estimate, but what is your thinking now on how we go forward, trying to focus somewhat more on the isolation of higher grade to really kick the economics, as opposed to just getting the resource bigger? Because I'm sure there's got to be some opportunities to start looking at where you can start a mine.
Yes, exactly. We certainly, well, some of this goes to the work that we're currently doing in terms of building an NSR model. And we're moving forward more aggressively with that now that we have the updated metallurgy. And so then that's simply going to tell you where your money is in the model, and that will allow us to create a stoping design and schedule a stoping design that will target the higher grade mineralization first. I keep referencing the Las Victorias area. You'll notice in the breakdown of the mineral resources that is some of the highest grade mineralization that occurs in the system. It is also occurs relatively near surface, and will be the area that one would start mining to affect pay down. So we're working on that in terms of isolating the higher grade mineralization. We'll do an evaluation based on the drill spacing as what is good enough, what we have to do next, and then that will start getting tied into an ultimate infill program that would be done as we identify, what's really going to be the top 20 or 25 million tons of the project. It's part of the strategy of taking the project to 30 to 35 million tons, because as you know, not all of it will be mined. And so our idea is that we've got some general ideas as to how big this project should be or could be. And we're thinking around 35 ton per day sort of operation, which, you'd like to get about a 15-year mine life. And that attracts the big boys. That attracts the major smelters. It attracts the major miners in Mexico, if you're in and around that size. And so that's sort of what we believe right now is a sweet spot for the project. It's our goal in terms of our next stage of exploration on the project. It isn't just a number, yes, we can make it bigger, but this is why we're doing it quite specifically, is to get to a point where we can develop this in the sweet spot of the deposit.
Great. No, that's a good answer. Thank you.
Thanks for all your questions, Rick. Scott, did any other questions come in from the audience?
Yeah, I was going to see if wasn't it Martin that we wanted to hear from first?
Yeah,
Martin, can you hear us? Just double checking on that. Can you hear us, Martin? Not quite, Martin. You could type in your question if you do have one. We're not able to hear you. Sorry about that. Yeah, I did have one question that came in from the audience, and I'll go ahead and read that now. It is, what is shareholder profile and how much does the management team own?
Good question.
It is a good question. I wish I owned more. Management team and friends and family, etc., around 5 to 7%. The major shareholder, of course, is Electrum at 36%. I don't think I could identify any funds that hold reportable amounts that I can reference.
Thank you.
Larry, anything else come from the group? Scott, are we good?
That was good. Yep, that's it.
Wonderful. Great presentation, guys. I want to turn it back to Rob and Larry for closing remarks.
We seem to have the wind at our back these days, and every morning I wake up and turn Kitco on, and I'm pleased with what I see. The market generally for silver seems to be recovering. You read the pundits, and it looks as if it's not just a one-day wonder. So I've been through these cycles before, and I'm hopeful that all of the building blocks are coming together so that we can take this to the stage where, if we're talking to you 9 months or so from now, we'll have a much clearer path of how this can be developed as a mine, how it can be funded, who's going to do it, and how we're going to get shareholder value.
Thank you, Larry and Rob. It was a great presentation. I want to thank everyone for your attendance today. We at O&M will be following up feedback. And as I said, if there are any further questions, please feel free to text them to us, and we'll make sure to get you an answer. I want to wish everyone a pleasant evening. Thanks so much again for your attendance.
Thank you so much. Thanks for listening to us.
Thank you.